Picture this: towering pyramids that pierce the sky, vast cities surrounded by dense jungles, and a society that excelled in science, architecture, and art. This was the heart of the Mayan civilization, one of the most advanced societies of the ancient world. Yet, despite their brilliance, the Maya experienced a collapse so profound that their once great cities fell into ruin, and their culture, at least in its golden age, came to an abrupt halt. But what happened? How did this advanced civilization, which flourished for over 1,000 years, crumble in the span of just a few centuries? It's one of history's greatest mysteries. Before we dive into the heart of the collapse, let's take a step back to truly appreciate the grandeur of the Maya. Their civilization wasn't just an ancient society. It was a beacon of progress in so many fields. And it wasn't just one city, either. It was a collection of powerful city-states, each with its own achievements, culture, and influence. Understanding their remarkable accomplishments helps us better grasp the magnitude of their fall. Let's start with the basics. Where and when did the Maya live? The Maya inhabited a region that is now composed of southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. Their civilization spanned over 1,000 years, from roughly 2000 BC to around the 10th century AD, although the heights of their civilization were seen between 250 AD and 900 AD. During this time, they reached levels of sophistication that many in the world today still marvel at. The Maya were masters of agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, and architecture. They created an intricate calendar system, had a deep understanding of the stars, and were pioneers in the development of the concept of zero, a groundbreaking mathematical concept. Perhaps most impressive were the Maya cities themselves. These urban centers were marvels of engineering. They built grand pyramids and monumental temples out of stone, many of which still stand to this day, like the pyramid at Chichen Itza or the Temple of the Inscriptions in Palenque. These were not just for ceremonial purposes. They also served as astronomical observatories, where priests and scholars could study the movements of the heavens and mark the passage of time. These structures were built with an understanding of geometry and the natural world that was far ahead of their time. But it wasn't just about the buildings. These cities were vibrant hubs of trade, politics, religion, and culture. Each city-state had its own ruler, who was seen as a divine figure, the link between the gods and the people. The Maya didn't just live. They thrived, building and learning, with a shared sense of identity tied to language, religion, and intellectual pursuits. Their trade network spanned from the highlands of Guatemala to the coastal areas of the Gulf of Mexico. But despite all of their achievements, something caused the Maya civilization to spiral into decline. This wasn't a sudden, catastrophic fall. It was a gradual collapse that unfolded over several centuries, and that makes it all the more mysterious. The great southern cities, like Tikal, Copan, and Palenque, were abandoned by the end of the 9th century. These once thriving cities, full of bustling markets, grand ceremonies, and intellectual activity, turned into ghost towns. The Maya, who had once been masters of their environment, were suddenly unable to maintain their civilization. So what went wrong? What caused their downfall? Let's start with the environment, which seems to have played a key role in this collapse. Imagine the Maya's reliance on the natural world. They lived in a region that relied heavily on rainfall. Their agriculture was based on rain-fed crops like maize, beans, and squash. This was the lifeblood of their society. In fact, much of their economy, trade, and culture revolved around this agricultural productivity. But then, something happened. A massive, prolonged drought struck the southern lowlands during the 8th and 9th centuries. This wasn't just a temporary dry spell. It was a series of severe droughts that devastated their water sources. Recent studies have shown that these droughts were likely far worse than anything the Maya had ever experienced before. Water sources that had once been reliable, rivers, reservoirs, wells, dried up, and without water, crops failed. The Maya had no contingency plan for such a catastrophic environmental event. The collapse of their agricultural system sent shockwaves through their society. And it wasn't just that crops failed. This also affected the population directly. When food became scarce, People were forced to leave their cities in search of sustenance. But drought wasn't the only issue at play. Over time, the Maya also practiced slash-and-burn agriculture. This method involves clearing forests by cutting down trees and setting them on fire to create space for crops. In the short term, it was a highly effective technique, allowing them to grow food in previously untapped areas. But in the long term, it led to serious problems. The constant clearing of land took its toll on the environment. Soil erosion and degradation became widespread. Without the protection of trees, the soil was left vulnerable to the elements, and crops could no longer thrive. In a cycle that compounded their struggles, the Maya were forced to clear more and more land, while the land itself became less and less fertile. Now, let's talk about internal issues that might have contributed to the collapse. Unlike a unified empire, the Maya civilization consisted of a series of independent city-states, each with its own ruler. While they shared a common language and religion, the cities were often in competition with one another. They fought for land, for resources, and for power. As the environmental challenges worsened, tensions between these city-states grew. Think about it. Resources were growing scarce, fertile land was becoming harder to find, and the agricultural collapse was imminent. The competition for these precious resources intensified, leading to warfare between cities. But the constant fighting drained the resources that could have been used for survival and resilience. What was once a prosperous, interconnected network of cities became a patchwork of warring states, each one struggling to survive. And there was a political element, too. The Maya rulers were believed to be divine figures, intermediaries between the gods and the people. Their authority depended on their ability to communicate with the gods and ensure prosperity for their people. But when crops failed and droughts ravaged the land, the people began to question their leaders' divine power. When religious ceremonies failed to bring rain, and the Maya saw their environment crumble, faith in the rulers began to falter. The result? Social unrest. It's easy to imagine that if your ruler couldn't even secure water for the people, why would you continue to follow him? The collapse of political authority, combined with the environmental collapse, made the Maya society more vulnerable to internal instability. Rebellions and uprisings against rulers likely became more common as people sought answers and change. By the end of the 9th century, many of the southern Maya cities were abandoned. Tikal, Copan, and Palenque, once mighty centers of culture, learning, and trade, were now silent ruins. However, this collapse wasn't universal. While the southern cities fell into ruin, the northern cities, particularly Chichen Itza, continued to thrive for a while longer. Chichen Itza, in particular, became a major power in the post-classic period. What made Chichen Itza and other northern cities more resilient to the environmental changes? They had access to different resources like cenotes, natural wells, and different agricultural techniques. Perhaps they were less vulnerable to the series of droughts that crippled the south. So while the southern cities were abandoned, the Maya civilization didn't completely disappear. It evolved and moved northward, adapting to new conditions. So what can we learn from the rise and fall of the Maya? The collapse of the Mayan civilization is a cautionary tale. It's not just about external invaders or conquests. It's about the fragility of a civilization when faced with environmental degradation, unsustainable practices, and internal strife. The Maya were undeniably advanced in many ways, but even they couldn't withstand the perfect storm of environmental collapse, resource depletion, political instability, and social unrest. And the lessons don't stop with ancient civilizations. Today, we face many of the same challenges: the threat of climate change, deforestation, water scarcity, and the depletion of resources. While we have technology and global cooperation, the Maya story serves as a stark reminder of the importance of sustainability, unity, and resilience in the face of adversity. We can look to their mistakes and triumphs as a guide for the world we're building today. Despite their downfall, the Maya didn't vanish. Their descendants are still living in the region today, preserving their language, traditions, and cultural practices. And even though the cities fell into ruin, the knowledge of the Maya endures. Their advancements in mathematics, astronomy, and writing continue to inspire us. The ruins of their cities, hidden deep in the jungle, remain as silent witnesses to a once great civilization. So what went wrong with the Maya? It wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of environmental challenges, political turmoil, and unsustainable agricultural practices. But there's a deeper truth here. Even in collapse, civilizations leave lessons for the future. And the Maya, with all their brilliance and flaws, left us an incredible legacy of knowledge and insight. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into one of the most captivating civilizations in history. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and ring the bell to stay updated. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think caused the fall of the Maya? And how can we apply their lessons to our world today? I'd love to hear your insights.